Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. I was planning for this afternoon session to ask Jagadish Pandit Prabhu to tell us some of his experiences in his many years of distributing books in this area. Of course, all devotees are engaged in Krishna's service, but Srila Prabhupada often stressed that the distribution of his books is the most important method of preaching Krishna consciousness. And it's quite an achievement to be going out year after year after year, traveling and distributing books. So congratulations to you for that, and congratulations to all the devotees who are engaged in various ways in bringing Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement to the conditioned souls. So I said that I was going to ask him to do that, but he went one stage better and held a seminar himself on book distribution. So maybe tomorrow or the next day I'll ask devotees about the various preaching experiences. I know that Smita Krishna Prabhu always has some interesting stories to tell, and other devotees also. But now we're going to take a journey to Belarus. I have a letter from the line on the moon, Devi Dasi. The Indureka means a line on the moon. So she wrote me a letter, and that can be read out now. I'll read it in English, and Gurnadam Prabhu will read it in Russian, and then I can discuss how to answer that. Oh, but I see. Then yeah, okay. Yeah, then you have to read it. Okay. So here's the letter from Indureka. You can go. Dear Guru Maharaj, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Please accept my humble obeisance. I would like to thank you for your seminar, Woman, Boss or Mother, Masters or Mothers. When I listened to it, I understood that everything was arranged sensibly and harmoniously in Vedic culture. But nowadays, regrettably, everything is turned on its head. But nevertheless, as much as I admired your seminar, I'd like you to help me to deal with some questions. You said that the main woman's mission is to be a wife and mother primarily. I agree that girls in Vedic culture were brought up that way. They did not know anything else except to give birth and raise children and housework. And really it is true that it is a shame to be a housewife nowadays, because now career and position in society are important for women among ordinary people. But not everything is so simple among the devotees. For example, I came to the Society for Krishna Consciousness when I was 21, and I began to live in a temple in half a year. It would be a good time to get married and have children, but I have lived in the temple, renounced, preached. I was not taught to be a good wife and mother. Glories to God, yet I got married when I was 27 and had a baby. But the consequences of living in a temple are both positive and not so. On one hand, I have taste for sadhana, early rising, Mangalarti, Sankirtan. It's not so easy to go into Maya now, but on the other hand, I have not a strong taste for family responsibilities. You say that women should want to be a wife and a mother. I am not against it, but personally for me it is boring just to be a wife and mother. It is not enough for me, and I see that it is my problem to some extent. That's why I go out on Sankirtan or Harinam once a week. Certainly I try that the husband and child do not feel anxious. For me, fulfillment of immediate responsibilities is austerity. Though on the other hand, I am not sure that I've been able to engage in Sankirtan. I'm not sure that I would have been able to engage in Sankirtan or other services permanently if I did not have a family. Guru Maharaj, what should I do? It is so hard for me to find a balance between responsibilities and active employment in the mission. I'll really go crazy if I stay at home all the time and do not take part in the mission. You said that the mother should preach to her children and give them Krishna consciousness. I understand that. Personally, in my case, I do not feel myself engaged in the mission of Srila Prabhupada without activities outside the family. I look at other Matajis who have a family. They are absolutely satisfied that they have children and household. They don't need anything else, but for me it is not enough. On the contrary, it is easier for me to fulfill my responsibilities if I go out on Sankirtan, Harinam, or if I just stay in the temple. All these things inspire me to continue. And my child also takes an interest in my hobbies, in Krishna consciousness, when he sees me happy. You are my guru and I would like to follow you. But even though, please help me to understand these issues, because such things which inspire us and help us not to mope and not to turn our life into a simple routine and daily life should exist. Also, I'd like to remember an example of the two wives of Lord Nityananda, Janavi Devi and Vasudha Devi. I don't want to compare myself with them in any way. Lord Nityananda quickly determined that he will have children from Vasudha, and with Janavi Devi he will distribute Krishna consciousness. What is it? Any individual cases or human's natural qualities? Dear Guru Maharaj, I do not want to contradict you and argue with you in any case. Just help me to sort it all out. Certainly, some cases at the beginning of the movement when Matajis have spread Krishna consciousness a lot of the time and their children have experienced some anxiety from this are known. But then there was a time. I don't want to repeat their mistakes, and I hope that my child will not hate me and devotees when he grows up. At least I'm trying to take care of these things. Also, one more thing bothers me in my spiritual practice. I am already 13 years in the Society of Krishna Consciousness, and I continue to feel ecstasy and enjoyment of certain types of service. I want to rise from the level where I enjoy myself by Krishna Consciousness, but I cannot. Before I thought that it is a way it should be, to feel happiness from certain activity in Krishna Consciousness. But now I understand that I should stop trying to enjoy just by myself. It is necessary to satisfy devotees and Krishna. And the difficulty is in this, because I want to do only what is pleasant to myself. What should I do? Should I do what I do not like and clear myself, or should I continue to do what I love, but in this case reacting calmly, controlling my ecstasy? I would be grateful to you, dear Guru Maharaj, if you help me, your disciple Indu Rekha Devi Dasi.
Мой ребенок также проявляет интерес к моему, в кавычках, хобби, сознанию Кришны, когда видит, что я счастлив. Вы мой духовный учитель, я хотела бы следовать вам. Прошу вас помочь понять эти моменты, поскольку должны же быть какие-то вещи, которые вдохновляют нас и помогают нам, так сказать, не унывать. Да. Также я хотел бы привести пример двух жен Господа Нитянанды, Джанави Деви и Васудха Деви. Не хочу тебя, конечно, сравнивать с ними никоим образом. Господь Нитянанда решил, что он будет иметь детей от Васудхи, а с Джанави Деви он будет распространять сознание Кришны. Что это? Это индивидуальные случаи или естественный учет, наверное, естественных качеств человека. Дорогой Гуру Махарадж, не хочу противоречить вам или спорить с вами никоим образом, просто помогите мне разобраться с этим. Конечно, в некоторых случаях, когда в начале движения Матаджи проводили большую часть своего времени, распространяя сознание Кришны, и в результате чего страдали дети, эти случаи известны. Но это было такое время. Я не хочу повторять их ошибки, и надеюсь, что мой ребенок не будет ненавидеть меня и преданных, когда вырастет. По крайней мере, я пытаюсь разобраться в этих вещах. Что еще беспокоит меня в духовной практике? Я уже 13 лет в обществе сознания Кришны и продолжаю испытывать экстаз и радость от определенных типов служения. Мне хочется подняться с этого уровня, где я наслаждаюсь. Но я не могу. Прежде я думала, что так и должно быть. Чувствовать счастье от определенной деятельности в сознании Кришны. Но теперь я понимаю, что мне нужно перестать просто наслаждаться. Необходимо удовлетворять преданных и Кришну. И трудность заключается в том, что Я хочу делать только то, что нравится мне. Что же мне делать? Делать ли мне то, что не нравится, то, что мне не нравится, и очищать себя, или продолжать делать то, что я люблю делать, и действовать, сохранять спокойствие и контролировать, так сказать, свой экстаз. Я буду благодарен вам, дорогой Гуру Махарадж, если вы мне поможете, ваша ученица Индурека Девидаси.
Many important points are raised here. It is a fact that the Vedic culture in its pristine form is sensible and harmonious, as is stated here, and that everything today is increasingly chaotic. We see that here in Russia, among the older generation, or not up until recent times, that men have no problem with playing their role as a man, and the women, they understand that their role is to serve their husband. But that concept is increasingly absent in the modern generation. And if we go to the West, to Germany, Britain, and America, there's no such idea at all. And as Srila Prabhupada said, it's just like cat and dog societies. So people are taken to Krishna consciousness, and there's some endeavor to give this Vedic culture, well, you can put it in the abstract manner if you can, and I'll continue. At least Srila Prabhupada wanted to bring that in because he understood that this modern way of life is not at all auspicious for anyone. And it's very difficult to practice spiritual life if you're on a template of materialism and sense gratification. So Srila Prabhupada wanted to introduce this Vedic culture. That was attempted in some ways and very immature ways in the early days of our movement. In many cases it was quite immaturely attempted. And mostly in much of the world today, it seems that our movement has given up the attempt to institute Vedic culture. And although it's not stated, but the attitude is more just do whatever you can, and it doesn't really matter what your philosophy is, but just somehow or other chant Hare Krishna. Oh, and be a vegetarian also. And it's better if you don't drink beer and tea. Srila Prabhupada was an idealist, and practically to support this very high ideal of Krishna consciousness, we need to have a culture. We can't run on the cat and dog culture. In this lifetime, I was born in merry old England, in Great Britain. Shortly after joining the movement, I found myself in Bangladesh, where the culture is just about as opposite to that of Britain as could be. Well, there are some things they have in common, and cannibalism is not practiced in either culture. In some places, like Polynesia and some parts of Africa, it was previously practiced, so there are some similarities, but not much. And very striking to me, amid the poverty at that time of Bangladesh and anyway, you can read about it in the glimpses of traditional Indian life, is that the coherent family unit was just unquestioned. So it was a great cultural education for me, because despite taking to Krishna consciousness, we do tend to carry with us much of our cultural baggage, as the saying goes. So although no one directly teaches it, in England there's an underlying current that actually we are the most civilized people in the world. All other countries and cultures are to be judged by how much they're like the British. Do you get waves of that the waves of that come over to Russia also? No, you didn't hear about that. Okay. They didn't infiltrate the Iron Curtain, not much. The British culture didn't infiltrate the Iron Curtain much. Although someone's saying yes over there. Comrade Brezhnev kept them out. So anyway, when I went to living in England with a dysfunctional culture. I mean, it's a long story how I joined this movement, but when I was at school, I just saw everyone around me is completely miserable. I don't want to be like these people all my life. Everyone's just playing a role. That's called a persona. No one's satisfied. I mean, even there's a famous song about that. I can't get no satisfaction.
Well,
So even you know it.
Wow. It was one of my favorite songs.
It's still a famous song because it resonates so aptly with the modern way of life. Actually, a few years ago, getting off the subject a bit, I was on a flight in Canada, and I've seen many movies on the airplanes. I mean, I don't put in the earplugs, but so they had a movie of the Rolling Stones tour in Canada, and there are these men like 60 plus years old, with all these young teenage girls screaming at them, and they're standing wiggling their bums as if they're some kind of sex symbol, and they're already 60 plus years old. It's just so ridiculous. If you see the face of Keith Richards, looked like he'd already died, but he didn't realize it. So anyway, I in Bangladesh, I found it's people are just, they don't have all these psychological hang-ups. They're actually, they have a very tight family structure, and they're, materially speaking, very happy in that. So it really resonated with me, really brought home that all these things that I'm reading in Prabhupada's books and hearing Prabhupada talking about in the lectures, it's not just some kind of theoretical idea, but it actually works. So the basic principles of it are not very difficult to understand. So I've become an advocate of... Anyway, I just wonder what Prabhupada says anyway, but I'm an advocate of Vedic culture for devotees and for saving the world. But it's understandable if women raised in this cat and dog culture can't quite get a grip on those principles. We're not blaming them for that, but we're just saying that it's difficult to overcome our conditioning. And actually, Srila Prabhupada, while he spoke of implementing Vedic culture, mostly with his Western women disciples, he didn't try to force it on them. Srila Prabhupada said that he engaged his women disciples in the West in book distribution and various services. But he also wanted to establish farm communities, Krishna-conscious farm communities. And he said that the daughters of my disciples, they can learn how to cook and clean and be good Krishna-conscious housewives. And he also wanted them to learn to read so that they could read his books. Now here Mataji Indureka writes that girls in Vedic culture were brought up so they didn't know anything else except to give birth, raise children and housework. But actually there's a lot more to it. They also have a very strong religious culture. So it's not just that women in Vedic culture are baby machines, but they also have very strong religious life, because that is the culture. That everyone in pristine Vaishnav culture, everyone is very Krishna conscious. That means there's, for everyone, men, women, children, there's lots of hearing and chanting about Krishna, many festivals, deity worship, everything that is cooked is offered to Krishna and distributed as prasadam. And that is the Vedic culture that Srila Prabhupada wanted to introduce. Those young women who join our temples, there's not much opportunity for that nowadays, but those who join in the West, they do get a solid background in Krishna consciousness. But it's also true that the psychophysical, as I mentioned in that Women Masters and Mothers seminar, the psychophysical nature that goes with a woman's body is there's a very strong need to have children. And that can be very well dovetailed in Krishna consciousness by having children and raising them in Krishna consciousness. Those who are not raised in that culture, they may not have a taste for family responsibilities, but responsibility means responsibility. It's not whether you like to do it or don't like to do it. You have to do it as a duty. And one should know that if one raises children in the service of Krishna, that's also devotional service. That's also pleasing to Krishna. Now, there's no such thing that that women should only be housewives and stay at home. They can also engage in Krishna conscious activities with other Matajis and in the temple. Now, we don't find in the descriptions of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's public Sankirtan that women participated, but Srila Prabhupada's adjusting to the modern age, he wanted his women disciples in the West, he encouraged them to go on Harinam and all these things. So don't think it's wrong for women to go on Harinam Sankirtan. That's very good. At least in the West. It may be a different situation in India. One devotee from Bangladesh, he told me he'd been on the the Navadip Dham Parikrama with the Bengali devotees. And he said the local villagers were shocked by seeing the women all dancing, the Bengali women dancing in public, which they'd learned from the Western devotees. So there are definitely cultural differences, but Srila Prabhupada, he wanted to spread Vedic culture throughout the world, not via ISKCON, bring Western culture to India. Now there is an idea coming from many leaders in our movement in America and Western Europe that we should just make the whole movement in line with Western culture, which is in line with what the leaders of the demoniac society think, that we have to make everyone Western. The Western culture should go everywhere. We won't stop our missionary activities until the Pritivite Ache Jotonagar Adigram Savatra McDonald's Hoibe. In every town and village there should be a McDonald's, and we'll bomb everyone and send in our drones and make sure that they all have access to McDonald's. They have this extremely arrogant idea that their animal-killing, soul-killing, so-called civilization is the panacea for all the world's problems, and actually it's the cause of all the world's problems. So, at least I'm convinced that the panacea is Krishna consciousness and Vedic culture. And it doesn't even make sense. I mean, even culture, if you're talking about cultural infiltration, then it doesn't, to bring this Western culture to places in much of the world, Africa, India, the Muslim country, I mean, most of the world, fortunately, is still not totally Westernized. So I'm talking here in a conceptual way, but what does Indureka Devi Dasi do exactly to bring it to the personal level? How to balance the two things? Yeah, it's a common question. How to balance? Well, each individual will have to do that. They'll have to find out how to do that in their situation. Anyway, it's difficult for householders to balance between their household responsibilities and Krishna consciousness. All householders have that difficulty in the modern age. The answer is come and live here. That was Srila Prabhupada's suggestion for Grihastha devotees, well, his program for Grihastha devotees, that you come and live among devotees, live peacefully, and you'll have good association and time for practicing Krishna consciousness. Of course, it doesn't have to be just here, but in principle, the village community. It's not that every Grihastha devotee has to do this, but it's certainly helpful for being Krishna conscious. So in the meantime, go on with your life, chant Hare Krishna, go on Sankirtan and all these things. Actually, I often get these kind of questions from Matajis, devotees, that they'd like to be a good housewife in Krishna consciousness, but they have the modern world is different, and how to live, how to adjust. And they also want to engage in the Sankirtan movement of preaching Krishna consciousness. So I often refer these devotees to one of my god sisters. There's one couple, a god brother and god sister of mine, who they're a very dynamic couple in Krishna consciousness. After raising a family, and their children are all themselves adults, so they're living as vanaprasthas and preaching Krishna consciousness together. So, like I say, I often refer Mataji devotees to the Haripada Prabhu, and Falini is his wife. I remember some years ago, Jayadvaita Swami said that this was when we were all still quite young. Prabhupada's disciples were mostly young. He said that the real problem is in our movement is that we don't have grandmothers. So now we do. So you can take guidance from the grandmothers who have lived and are living ideal lives in Krishna consciousness. There might not be any perfect adjustment between the life of a quiet housewife and that of an outgoing preacher in Krishna consciousness. But the perfect balance is one's sincere desire to please Guru and Krishna. And there are different models or different ways in which people can serve Guru and Krishna. And it's laudable if you want to engage in various activities in the Sankirtan movement. But just be careful not to neglect your family duties. Because as Indureka Mataji notes in her letter, that previously some Matajis, they were so much engaged in Sankirtan that they practically neglected their children, who then later became dissatisfied with Krishna consciousness. Here it's written, Lord Nityananda quickly determined that he will have children from Vasudan with Janava Devi. He will distribute Krishna consciousness. Janava Devi it should be, actually. Where's that statement from? I think it's from this Nityananda Charitamrita, some bogus book. I've been saying for years that it's bogus, but no one cares because they like it.
Yeah.
That's the main thing. If you like it, then it must be a Shastra. Try the Kama Sutra. I may get quoted on that. Bhakti Vikasa Swami said. So, another thing, certain services I like to do and I feel happy doing them. And it bothers me that I have this feeling that I want to be happy in Krishna's service. So it's nice that you're happy in Krishna's service. That's what we say, chant Hare Krishna and be happy. So go on performing service and being happy, but we have to cultivate the sense that we're doing everything for Krishna's happiness. It's not that I'm feeling happy. No, stop feeling happy. But we should be prepared to accept the inevitable difficulties and inconveniences that come in the course of serving Krishna, or in the course of doing anything in this world. So by regularly hearing about this principle of how we're supposed to act for Krishna's happiness, then we can gradually become purified of any personal desires. So it's not that we have to deliberately torture ourselves and think that that's Krishna consciousness. There are some religious systems, even prominent in the world today, which do that. I mean, the Shia Muslims, they whip themselves. Do you have them in Russia? I don't think so. Probably not. But it's still quite prominent in Iran and India and some places. So, yeah, be happy in Krishna consciousness. But don't cultivate the sense that I must be happy. That is my aim of my life. So if we regularly study Srila Prabhupada's books and hear Srila Prabhupada's lectures, then we'll imbibe a sense of Krishna consciousness. Highly recommended for everyone. Read all of Prabhupada's books, listen to all his lectures. When you've read them all and listened to them all, then what do? You read them all again, listen to them all again. You can also speak the message to others, and that way you'll also hear it yourself. And keep association with devotees who want to live in the spirit that Srila Prabhupada inculcates. From reading Srila Prabhupada's books, I get the sense of urgency that we have to surrender to Krishna. We have to utilize this rare human form of life to become free from all personal desires and become completely absorbed in Krishna consciousness. So if we associate with devotees who have that sense of urgency, then we ourselves will also imbibe that sense of urgency. But then if there's maybe someone else who says, don't be so fanatical. Take it easy, relax. Well, you can relax. As long as you like. There are at least 8,400,000 ways of relaxing. But if you want to go back to Godhead, then you have to take Krishna consciousness very seriously. So although it is difficult to rise above our conditioning, we can do and we should do by the process of Krishna consciousness. Nashta prayesh vabhadreshu nityang bhagavata sevaya bhagavatyutama shloke bhakti bhavati naishtiki. I hope you've all heard this verse before, right? It's a well-known verse. It states that by regularly hearing the Bhagavatam and serving the devotees, that all the inauspicious things within the heart are cleansed. Now that doesn't mean that we don't have our individual nature and inclinations. Before hearing Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna had the nature of a Kshatriya. After hearing Bhagavad Gita, he still had the nature of a Kshatriya. The difference was that before hearing Bhagavad Gita, he was thinking in terms of his own personal satisfaction. And after hearing Bhagavad Gita, he was thinking of how to act for Krishna's satisfaction. Just connected with this question, I'd like to speak a few words about the culture of feminism, which is very prominent in the world at the present time. Srila Prabhupada was opposed to it, as he was opposed to communism, scientism. Scientism is a recently coined word. It means the kind of dogma that comes along with modern science. That people insist, science, we have to understand everything scientifically, but they're actually quite dogmatic and not neutral observers of reality as science is supposed to be. So we may think, well, feminism is that's the way the modern world is, so why don't we just go along with it? That, let women be socially the way they are and chant Hare Krishna.
То есть пусть женщины занимают ту социальную роль, играют ту социальную роль, которую они играют сейчас, и просто повторяют Харе Кришна.
But there are many wrong and demoniac ideas associated with that. At least according to Shastra, we understand it goes against the natural order. As Srila Prabhupada often pointed out, there can never be equality between the genders because women's bodies do different things to men, namely they have babies. Some extreme feminists are proposing, what do we need men for? We'll just keep a few as sperm banks and just eliminate the rest and just have women. You may say, well, that sounds ridiculous, but then, Hitler's ideas sound ridiculous, but they had a lot of influence. There's this feminist propaganda that all the problems in the world are caused by men, and that all the problems of the world are caused because men have oppressed women. So I don't want to go into it in too much detail, but it's a bogus philosophy, which it's absolutely on the bodily platform. It ignores or it's completely incognizant of the fact that we are by nature spiritual living beings, that human life is meant for God realization. It arises from the hedonistic idea that human life is meant for every individual to pursue sense gratification to the fullest extent possible. Feminism is intimately connected with pro-abortion, which is clearly demoniac. And this whole idea that, you should just do what you want. That destroys the whole family structure. And therefore divorce is rampant in the world. So the idea that, we should just go along with it because that's the way this society is, that's a very wrong idea. At least we see that Srila Prabhupada was very much opposed to it. And he wanted to give an understanding of how to live life actually is in human civilization, which is conducive for cultivating Krishna consciousness. So, Hare Krishna. Maybe I'll take one or two questions and then we'll break up for the arati. Usually there are many, many questions on all these subjects. In that Women, Masters or Mothers seminar, I actually covered quite thoroughly many of these topics, which I've again spoken today to some extent. Well, I said Masters or Mothers because nowadays there's this idea that women should be called Prabhu, which means master. So I say if you want to call everyone Prabhu, why not just call everyone Mataji? Because the jiva is after all Prakriti. So better call everyone Mataji. So we can say Jagadish Mataji. It's absurd, isn't it? I mean, it's just absurd. But it's there right at the top of our movement. You'll find big leaders calling the Matajis Prabhu because they're afraid if they don't call them Prabhu that the Matajis will bite their heads off. Okay. All right, I didn't see any hands shooting up. There's one hand over there. Yeah, please say.
So it's not a question. It's actually I'd like to express my gratitude because I'm a mother of 5 children and 6 grandchildren, and actually I was suffering. I was torturing myself that I just perform family duties and I do not participate in the mission. And this psychological problem led to high blood pressure and bits of heartache. But now I'm very much peaceful and satisfied by your explanation.
Hare Krishna! Srila Prabhupada ki jai!